Contributed talk today, and these are 10 minutes each, is by Kathy Koenig. Actually, all the contributed talks look really interesting today, so we want to make sure we have our full time. So I'm going to let you go ahead and get started.
All right, so does everybody have a copy that I've been passing out? And if you want an electronic version, just drop me an email. My email address will be at the end of this. So I've been using exam wrappers for quite a while. This was not my idea. It came from, I want to say, Carol Dweck, but can anybody confirm that? No one I asked seemed to know.
Seems like a thing she would do.
Yeah, it's anyway. So I kind of reorganized my talks a few times today after hearing other people talk. So we'll see what it's kind of a surprise to me what comes up here. All right. So learning strategies that were successful in high school are not typically successful in the college setting. And part of the challenge, so I teach mostly freshmen engineers in calculus-based physics, and part of the challenge is that they're not even aware that there are other strategies out there. And you already heard a lot this morning, particularly in Ted Clark's earlier about this, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this. I don't need to. But my students kind of have these behaviors, all right? So a lot of highlighting the textbook. They don't know how to read a text. Homework is last minute. My biggest challenge is they like to Google their solutions. Oh, gosh, yes. All right? So we actually look at WebAssign online homework score. So I think the average in my class last semester was about 95%. You can imagine that correlation with exam scores is not really there. So they have a lot of resources to get the right answers, but doesn't mean they're learning. Preparing for exams, a lot of memorization. So those might have been successful strategies in another course or maybe in high school because my students are freshmen. I'm assuming they came in with these ideas, but they're not typically successful in our class. And a quote from Ted Clark this morning, success in class depends on understanding and not just completing assignments. Right? Right, exactly. So my students like to, I told you I'd change my talk slides. Real time. I am a fan of Ted Clark. All right. Ted actually came down to UC August a year ago and did a session, a 3-hour workshop with the faculty on what he did this morning. And then
I'm going to stop coming down if you're going to quote me directly.
Well, I haven't put any of your slides up yet, so we'll see if I have any of those in here. All right, so one of the, I like to use a lot of surveys. And here's I was doing this separate session like Ted talked about this morning with my students, and I had like 20% show, but they were most of them were students that didn't need to be there, that outside of class session. They came because they thought I had something important to say, which of course I did, but they weren't the students who needed to be there. So I surveyed my students to find out. I mean, some of them had 95% on the exam. Because this was, it's great you're here, but that wasn't for you specifically. So I surveyed them and found out that a lot of students have this belief that the strategies that they're using or the new strategies they've picked up since coming for college are working just fine. But I know they're not working fine. This is early in the term. So this is spring, so they've already gone through Calc 1 in the fall. These are all engineering majors and whatever engineering courses they have in the fall. So now they're seeing physics for the first time at the college level in the spring, and 83% think things are just fine. This is before the first exam. All right, but that means if I'm going to do that outside of class session, there's only 17% that might even have an inkling that they might need some help. So they're not ready to hear the message. So instead of doing what Ted does, it takes the whole class and does the metacognition session. I do what I call sprinkling. So that grid that he showed, and I have a picture of that later here. That grid that he showed, like what to do before, during, after class, I give that to students the first week, and then I keep hitting them up with what are we working on this week. So I'm sprinkling across the course. They all get it because this tells me they may not be ready to hear my message. So exam wrappers or surveys can be used as reflection tools to get students to think about their behavior. So what you have in your hand is given to the students after their first exam. So they get their first exam back, and then they're given this assignment. I've done it on paper, and I've done it on through Blackboard, which is digital. I think I prefer paper better. Because of what I'm going to say, well, they'll get it back before their second exam. So basically, they complete this. They get 5 extra credit points on their classroom participation points. Now, these are engineers. There's 1,200 points in the class. You think they would realize 5 points out of 1,200. It's not going to change anything, but I get a very high response rate because they want the 5 points. That's fine. It's to get them to reflect on it. But I don't want to look at the first page, actually. Let's look at the second page first. So there's 3 main purposes. the first page is his first purpose. But let's jump to the second one. I want them to reflect on their study habits. What score did you get on the exam? How did you prepare for the test? So question number 6 is asking them to go back and find out what % of the time was spent on each of these activities. It gives me some sense of how they're preparing for my exams. And a lot of them don't know how to do these strategies properly. So it's getting them to sort of commit to what they're doing. Number 7 says, when you look at your exam that you just got back, where did you lose the most points? And sort of that's an eye-opener. And then the bottom of that page is just for me to get a sense of who the student is, because most of our students had high school physics, but not all of them have. Right? And then the third purpose is on the last page, for the teaching team and the students to better understand how to support their learning. And so if you flip to the back, I summarized, so those last 2 questions, 11 and 12, are asking what 3 things can you do to improve your performance in the class, what will you do? And I want them to think about the metacognitive learning strategies that I've sprinkled across the course that Ted talked about this morning. And then what 3 things could the teaching team do? Or what could the teaching team do? And that would be myself, TAs, learning assistants. I take all those comments and I group them, and this is just an example. I actually put this on my doc camera and I talk to the students about this. Because I want them to know that I read every single one, which is another reason to have it on paper. But then I can also kind of group them. So if you look at the top of that very last page, class time comments. You know, what were the things students told me about this that we as a teaching team can do better to support your learning? And then I will provide feedback. Oh, yes, I can do this, and this is how it will look. Or no, we can't do that because. So it's really I always learn something from the students. We always make changes. Usually they want more practice problems or solutions, etc. And then what can you do differently? And that's at the bottom of the page. And by going over this with students, they can also see other strategies that our students are suggesting. They get this back before the second exam. So as they prepare for the second exam, I give this back to them and ask them, this is what you told me, have you been doing it? All right, but the first purpose, I'll just jump to here since I probably have about 2 minutes. Okay, so I wanted to see about since I've been sprinkling these ideas across class, how are students responding to those ideas? And that's what the first page gave me a little bit of feedback. All right, so this is the grid that I use, and it's very similar to what Ted showed you this morning. I use these, though, to generate my multiple choice questions. So before class, do you do nothing? Do you do this? Do you do this? I just use it to generate my questions. Typically before class, so this is at the beginning of the term, and that's at the end of the term. So I did see a nice shift that more students were starting to preview the material, and I had less students doing nothing. Not huge yet, all right, but I'm getting better. Mentally engaged in class. These are just running through some answers here for you. Most of the time, 60%, 40% said maybe 75% of the time. So my percent that are very mentally engaged, at least, is low. All right, slide 3, beginning of the term. Now, I don't have the end of the term on here because I ran out of time this morning, but I saw big shifts from beginning of the term in A and D. These went up above 90%. So more students were starting to use class time to identify problem-solving strategies and take good notes to refer back to later. I do not allow them to use a computer, a laptop, to take notes. I shouldn't say I don't allow, but I highly discourage. I ask them to write them out. So I'm really promoting these every day in class, and so by the end of the term, to see shifts in some of those was nice to see. This was not a great slide, so I'm gonna put the graph in here in a second. But I asked them, which of these do you struggle with during class? And I compared my class to another class that uses cell phones for clickers, whereas I don't allow cell phones in my class. They have to have a clicker to click, whatever those things are called. I'll just show you the data. All right, so this is not great. So you're not allowed to have a cell phone in my class, but yet 50% of my students got distracted by their cell phone. All right, I'm the MLS class, multiple learning strategies integrate into my class. But you can see that more of my students tended not to get distracted, 30% versus 10. And I'll just put this one last slide that I'll just point out. This is me I got the wrong slide up here, that's okay. You can pretend that this is me before I started doing no metacognitive learning strategies. My students love Google. They love Chegg.com. That's where they get their answers. So in spring 17, I was not doing this. I was not doing metacognitive learning strategies. 52% of my students, or 54% I think it was, were using Chegg. This term, this past spring, only 30%. I was talking to them, like Ted said this morning, you've got to look for understanding. You're not just checking a box when you do your homework. So I don't know if they're lying to me, but to have a shift from 52 to 30% is fun. So that's it. There's my email on the next. Kathy.Koenig@uc.edu if you want a digital copy. Or I guess I can send it to you, Kevin, right? You can put it on the
Yes, please send me your presentations if you're giving presentations.
Yep. Can you take a question while Mark's sending it? Probably.
I can answer it.
Can you send that?
I'm sorry.
The survey was anonymous. I thought there was a high percentage of honesty about Chegg.
Was that particular survey anonymous? Yes, that one was at the end because it was through Blackboard. Right. Yeah, that's a good question.
We're going to learn in the next 10 minutes what guys need,
Yeah. This is totally different than what we've been talking about all day. However, there is a connection because I did my PhD at Michigan as well. A lot of Michigan going in. I have a couple of books that I love to peruse. Doesn't everyone like to look at problems from old math competitions in Hungary? I have no idea where I found these books, and then somebody wrote a third edition, but these are from late 18s, early 1900s. Some noted physicists have won this competition. So I was looking through the book. There's some interesting, whatever that is, algebra kind of questions. There was a cool geometry thing with Sierpinski gasket and take away an infinite number of little squares and blah, blah, blah. This is the one that caught my eye. It said, consider a line segment. Build two parallel segments off of it. Draw, then connect the tips here like so. That constructs this point C prime. And then build that little segment, C prime. And then ask yourself, how are the lengths of AA, BB, and CC related to each other? And I see a bunch of triangles there. Time to haul out some similar triangles. I always like to say to my students, remember when you learned about similar triangles and you said, when am I ever going to need this? Today. So you set up a ratio there. AB is to AA as CB is to CC. You do that again with those two triangles. Add those two equations together. And then you notice over there on the right-hand side that AC plus CB is just AB. So you put AB in there, and then the angels sing. And out comes an equation that looks awfully familiar. Okay, so where we know that from, say, resistors in parallel. If you have R1 and R2, they add to R equivalent. 1 over R1 plus 1 over R2 is 1 over R equivalent. Nice, you can wander through that derivation yourself.
I'm at whoa, what just happened?
All the physicists learn.
Whoa.
And also, of course, capacitors in series works the same way. Thin lens equation.
Yeah.
I always thought thin lens equation was given by God, but you can actually derive it if you draw those three principal rays, right?
Yeah.
Suffers no deviation, in parallel, out through the focal, in through the focal, out parallel. I see more triangles, do a bunch of similar triangles, look at those two, that gives you a relationship, look at those two, that gives you a relationship. Do some algebra, ta-da, comes a thin lens. Same relationship. I'm sorry, I'm flying so fast.
That's similar relationship.
It's very similar. This is one that I didn't realize. I was telling somebody about this, and they say, well, it also works here. If Ann can do a job in a certain amount of time, let's say TA, and Bob can do the same job in time TB, how long would it take them to do it together? And it turns out the rates add, and ta-da. All right? So what I thought was maybe we can use this to actually build a calculator to do these kinds of problems. So first thing is the angles make everything complicated. It doesn't matter what those angles are. So why don't we just straighten this thing up here? Okay, and then slap a grid on it. And if those two diagonal lines, if we could move those around by putting them, say, on some transparency film, maybe pivot it there in the corner so they can do that. Oh, thank you. That's exactly the reaction I wanted. And so now to do a problem like there, 1 over 12 plus 1 over 24, you just see where they cross. Bam, 1 over 8. Bam. Yeah. So you could you could label your graph with resistances and do a resistor calculation. You actually can get more info out if you label the horizontal axis as well in percentage. Turns out that's the percentage of the current that flows through resistor 1, and that's the percent that flows through resistor 2. And if it were capacitors, it would be the percentage of voltage drop across each one. It works for the cooperation problem, and those percentages will be how much work was done, how much of the job was done by Ann versus how much was done by Bob. With the thin lens, yeah.
No, it's 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you. I thought. It gets a little trickier, but you can still do cool stuff. So one cool thing is you can run the problem backwards, right? If you just use the one pointer to set at 18, look at where you want your focal length, what will the image distance be? So you just have to put your line in and read off the image distance. One thing I like about the special case when object distance equals image distance, there'll be twice the focal length. So you can see exactly why that has to be here. If your two pointers are pointing at the same numbers, 8 and 8, of course they're going to cross halfway, so it'll be halfway up. So you'll see that if object distance equals image distance, they will be twice the focal length. Kind of nice. We can make that horizontal axis tell us something. It's not quite so neat now. Let me shrink it, add some negative numbers there so we can have negative image distances, for example. And we'll extend it over to the left there. So now, if the object distance is 6, so we put this pointer pointing at 6, but we're going to have to extend it out, and the focal length is 10, what we have to do then is start here and go to that intersection, trace it back over there. Image distance is negative 15. Still works. Here's another one, more straightforward. If the object distance is 8, image distance is negative 24. Where do they cross? Focal length is 12. Ta-da. And you can see the special case when the object distance is at the focal point. So okay, I pointed my object distance at 8. Focal point is 8. So now what I need to do is draw a line from here that goes through that intersection. And you can see that line isn't going to hit the image distance axis. The horizontal axis, we can make it do some work for us. It's just that you have to label it with crazy numbers. And now you can read off the magnification. And that also works if it's in this extended format. So, there it is. Does that work? So I made some of these. If you'd like one, you can have one. If not, you can take one of these bookmarks that has a link to a Dropbox where all the PDFs of these things are, and you can spit them out. Here's the PDFs. Just look like that, and there's a PDF with the pointers on it, printed out on transparency film. Just to steal a minute, I'm sorry. I wondered, you're kind of limited on what your resistors can be because the scales are fairly small. Could we go to log and use curved pointers? And the answer is yes, you can. And instead of swinging the pointers, you just slide these logarithmic curves up and down, and it still works exactly the same way. Anyway, so help yourself.
For me to refuse free stuff.
Make sure to proudly present that Mount St. Joseph folder so your students can see it.
Oh, yes.
This is like the coolest thing I've ever seen.
I will be happy to
For
I
me.
think these are all left.
I am so gonna show this.
You may not get a paper for the third.
You know,
Everybody.
We still have 20 seconds. If you'd like to pay attention to the time of meeting.
So I'm Dean Stocker. I'm at the UC Blue Ash College, and this talk is sort of an ad. I was part of the NSF RET workshop last summer, and it actually helped me out a lot. And it was originally designed for STEM teachers in grades 6 to 12, and they opened it up last year to community college as well. So I was in the first batch of community college people. And so we all had kind of different things we got out of it based on who we were. But I thought I'd let you know what it was all about. And it's almost time to register for next year. So this is, if you want to be involved next year, you can apply. So basically, it's a chance to develop an engineering project. I wanted in one of my classes to replace the final exam with a final project instead. But I also knew that if I make a group project and make it like 30% of the grade in the class, there was potential for a lot of problems. And so it was great having these people to talk with and work through the summer to try and build something that makes sense as a replacement for a final exam. So that was really helpful for me. A chance to connect with research at UC, that was also, there's a potential publication that I could be a part of as a result of what I did, and a lot of high school teachers and like 7th and 8th grade teachers who were there. This is their first chance to like get into an engineering laboratory and play with the tools and do fun stuff. So that's kind of what it is. So what I put into it was almost 2 months of the summer, and it's under new management now, but the management last year led us to believe that you get there at 9 in the morning, you finish at 6 p.m., and there's plenty of working time in between to take care of everything. That really didn't end up being true. I spent like all of my time for almost 7 weeks working on this. So it is a big time commitment and a lot of sitting, thinking, trying to work out what you're going to do and putting together a lot of deliverables. What you get out of it, get $6,000. That's not too bad. I can't argue if I'm going to spend my summer putting together this project and then someone says, oh, I can help you and pay you for the privilege of helping. So that was nice. And a free computer, not this one. Then really getting to know people, a lot of faculty at UC, in addition to the high school students or high school teachers in the area. Chances to present like today, and a STEM conference last month down in KU as well. And then really, as I said, the big thing for me was the lesson plans. There are a ton of deliverables for it. So there are all kinds of things. To me, the biggest things that have come out so far, that STEM conference presentation I did last time, my unit plans I've already talked about. Also a team video. There are people concerned about, if I want to start making videos, I don't know how to do it. That's another whole, we had like 2 or 3 days of people coming in and helping us put videos together. And I can tell you about the research project, but I thought maybe you'd rather just watch my video. So Marie and I put together this it's about 3.5 minute video. So if all goes well, this is what you could do. Do we have sound? Oh, there it is.
Fine particulate matter, or PM 2.5, has been linked to adverse health effects. These particles enter our lungs when we inhale, and they tend to remain there when we exhale. There are many components of fine particulate matter, and one called black carbon is linked especially strongly to adverse health effects.
Dean, you're never going to believe this. In my 8th grade science class, we're learning about pollution and its effects on the community too. Did you know 10 billion pounds of unmined coal ash ponds are located right next to the Ohio River at the Becktorch Station in New Richmond, Ohio? They contain arsenic, mercury, sulfuric acid, lead, and many other toxins. Many people in the community fear a repeat from the 80s, when their source of drinking water was contaminated from the ash ponds. Students in my class are going to use the engineering design process to design a plan to safely clean up the ash ponds. Prior to completing the challenge, students will graph and analyze PM 2.5 values collected in Claremont County and investigate the characteristics of organisms suitable for bioremediation.
That's great, Marie. Can we get back to our presentation now? Camp Washington is nestled between Interstate 75 and a busy rail yard. There are arteries through Camp Washington where traffic is heavy. There are many small industries and restaurants, and in the midst of all these potential sources of pollution are homes.
The focus of our summer research was to understand spatial and temporal variation of PM 2.5 and black carbon. We spent 2 weeks walking and driving through Camp Washington, measuring the concentrations of PM 2.5 and black carbon, using a smartphone app called GPS Logger to correlate our data with specific locations in Camp Washington.
That's a great idea. Using a smartphone to take scientific data. We could do that in my physics class at college.
We'll do a unit called Physics is Everywhere, and the students can use their phones to take data for it. And GPS Logger isn't the only app they can use. Lab for Physics is another one. And if they have an iPhone, it's really easy to take slow motion video. They can even analyze video recorded on their phone using a free program called Tracker. The students will choose something they're interested in, maybe energy or cars, boxing, archery, anything really. Then we'll go through the engineering design process to study how that topic relates to physics. And they'll end up with presentations about how physics relates to something that they care about.
Hey Dean, weren't we talking about collecting data in Camp Washington a minute ago? That's something I care about. When we put our data on the map, we noticed some interesting things. For one, there are hot spots of PM 2.5, like this one. That is from a large dirt pile at a construction site. Dust gets on the road there, and then cars kick it up every time they drive by. Another interesting thing we saw is the concentration of black carbon is higher in the southern part of Camp Washington than in its northern part. There could be several reasons for that. Maybe it's because the interstate and the rail yard are closer together there. Or maybe the businesses in that area are producing black carbon.
But the time for our summer research is over. Maybe next year another red team can pick up where we left off.
That was wonderful. Bravo! I loved that. Oh, it was great. Well, it was pretty good. Well, it wasn't bad. Well, there were parts of it that weren't very good. It could have been a lot better. I didn't really like it. It was pretty terrible. It was bad. It was awful. It was terrible. Get away! Hey, boo!
So that's what we did. And the flyers you've just gotten are hot off the presses. There are 5 different labs that we'll be working with next year at UC. They have various different subjects they'll be looking at. You can look at the homepage for RET, which is there. There's actually written on there, there's the 2019 one. It's not up yet. So if you go to that one that's on the flyer today, you won't find anything. But if you go here, you can see what was in previous years and be ready for the next one. And then the contact person is Laura Buchanan. And her email is also on that form. Thank you.
Sounds like you are supporting a war on coal that is causing over 2,000 people a year to die. So,
The war on coal.
the war on coal is what you are describing right now.
Well, diesel trucks actually is the biggest source that we had. So.
carrying coal.
So this is a little bit last minute because we did it last
No,
night.
no. It was merely, here's how we got here. Doug said to me, Kevin, what would you like to present tomorrow? Okay.
Well, we've both been talking about this really the whole school year so far, and you definitely are more of an expert than I am, but we both have been trending towards standards-based grading and listening to other high school teachers talk about it for a few years.
Excellent high school teacher.
Absolutely. And you may want to give them a little bit of background on what you did this summer.
There was basically a train wreck that happened at a staff meeting, and it was the district said they were going to standards-based grading, but they weren't going to use the standards part of standards-based grading, which seemed odd. And when I've told that to people who are standards-based graders, said that's impossible. I said, but that's how our district is doing it. So I said, I want to know more about this. And Mark Schober gave a presentation at the AMTA meeting that was in New Albany this past year, this past summer. And in that he said, we're having this workshop in New York City. Come join us if you'd like. And my principal, who gave up her Saturday to come out, I merely invited her because I thought I'd get credit for the invite, and she would never show up. She showed up and she said, do you want to go to this? I'll pay to send you there. You'll just pay for food. I said, free trip to New York? Sure. Sign me up and I get to learn about something I want. While there, they showed me this grade book for standards-based grading. So what you have here, each column is a standard. And all those standards get put together in this one grade. So a kid, when they see it, they see something like this, where they have all the different assessments they have. Each assessment has certain standards on it, how they did, different standards. And then this is, for this one standard, this kid was assessed twice, and they got an average of 9 on the way it's calculated for that. And there were different ways you can choose to assess it. This standard, the kid got assessed 5 times, and the way they're being assessed in mine is their highest score from some other exam or assessment, and their most recent score is averaged together. And then they have to be 2 unique scores for that if there's 2 scores to be done. So the kid can see what they've done. This child was able to look at this assessment here and say, I don't think I did this very well. I need some help. Can I do corrections on this? Can I get some other things? So this is the grade book that I used. Then I took the score that's on that other screen and said, Infinite Campus, which is like Power School or something like that. Out of 100 points, here's the score the kid got. And then I just updated that every week and said, if you want more information, link to this, because this had many different layers to it. And you could, this standard can be calculated one way, this standard can be calculated a completely different way. So Doug has all his lab skills completely averaged. So every score counts in there. Mine are highest and latest.
So I do an average combined with the best in a particular lab skill that I want. So the thing that's nice is there's a lot of flexibility there. Because for me, I was concerned about students who would say, wow, if it's only the best and the latest of a lab skill, why am I going to do the first 5 labs very well? And I don't know if that's a real concern or not, but it was in my mind. And so I wanted there to be some accountability across all of them. At the end of the quarter, we both got feedback from students too. And so I don't know if you want to talk a little more about this.
No, I was just going to say, here's the different methods you can do a calculation of. And the person who made this, this person is the person responsible for this graph. And this graph explains, I think, learning quite well. You don't know what you don't know. You're relatively happy.
Yeah.
You have no frustration. Your confidence level is pretty high. As you get to the point where you learn what you don't know.
This is Ted's midterm 1 right there,
Yeah.
by the way.
You get to this frustration point. You get to that frustration point where you either give up or you fight through it, and then you'll start learning. And at that frustration point, your confidence level is at a lowest, but you've learned some stuff. And then as you get over that frustration hump, your confidence level, your knowledge level goes. And I say, if you've ever watched a kid shoot a basketball, the first time they shoot, their arms are crisscrossed, the ball has almost no chance going in, but they're awful happy throwing that ball around. Then they start learning, the elbow needs to be in and things along those lines. They can't make baskets, but they get frustrated because they know they're doing something wrong, but they don't really they haven't really figured it out. And then as they start to get to the conscious competence, that I know what I know, but I have to think about it. So now they have to think about it as they're shooting the basket, and it takes a long time for them to do that. Eventually you get to the unconscious competence. I don't even have to think about this. I just do it the right way every time. So Josh, who came up with this, said, I don't like how these other SBG books are. I'm going to build my own. And that's what he built, was this. And he has been very responsive to us of like, I have this problem. Can you fix it? And he's a full-time teacher as far as I understand.
Yeah.
And it's like, later that day, I fixed the problem for you. Or, oh yeah, that's happened, here's a solution. Or, oh, you wanted this different way to calculate things. Doug asked for a different scale to be available. And he built it and did it for us.
I wanted a semi-log scale.
Yeah.
I will say this, it's interesting as we've been navigating into standards-based grading this year. I do a lot of student discussions, and I try to do a lot of metacognition with my students also. And I asked them to take the trip with me at the beginning of the year because I did not do all the summer experiences you did, but I realized that when we were having to transition to a different grading system this year, I could transition to a different crappy grading system or maybe a good one. It's going to be equally a lot of work, so why not try to go to a good one? But I really let my students know this is where I want to head. Not sure if it's quite as thought out as I want, but I'm not going to mess you up.
You said to your students, I'm going to do this new way, and I'm going to look at grades how they were before for a class of similar level. And if these grades are depressed compared to the other ones, we'll fix it. We won't end up hurting you because of that. And I ended up with the 9 weeks where my kids were a little higher grades than I would have expected, which is fine. But I think because they were aware, I didn't know how to do this one, and I did some stuff to fix my lack of knowledge in that. And they were more aware of things. The worst comment I got about that SBG book is it didn't seem any worse than the other one. That was the worst comment I had. The others were, I really liked it. It split it up into here's the thing I need to know. So like I gave kids like here's a list of standards, and the list we started out, even though people told us you want a small list of standards,
but they're also important.
Was
Kevin.
still too much. So we had I think like 30 or so for the 9 weeks. And apparently that's too much to try to assess multiple times. But like I built the list by reaching out to people on Twitter, email, or whatever, and said, hey, I know you do standards-based grading. Can I have your standards? They said yes. And I put together a master list of, like, here is all the energy and momentum standard. This might be the cut-down list. But I basically reached out. I had a long list of things that then Doug and I sat down and said, okay, let's try to come up with a list. He came up with his list. I came with my list. Surprisingly, they were somewhat similar.
We exchanged and then improved, from there. At the end of the quarter, at the beginning of this quarter, I got them back together again. And I wanted honest feedback. And the feedback, you're hoping for positive feedback, and it was much more positive than I was hoping for. That's not to say there's not going to be modifications, but feedback like by looking at that particular grade book, I knew exactly what standards I needed to work on. I knew what I knew. I knew what I didn't know. You would think they would from all the other evidence we have in class, but it was laid out nicely for them. I had a student who was a football player who had a lot of problems in the first part of the quarter, who then came in for work, wanted to do a retake, but because of that, there are requirements for that. You don't get just to do it because you want to do it. There's got to be evidence that you deserve that. Came in at 5 o'clock after practice, did things, did well on the retake, and understood like the reasoning for improving, and that he was not in such a hole that he couldn't learn it. And my goal is I want them to learn it. I would ideally like them to learn it in a timely manner.
I had some habits of mind, kind of mindset stuff for the kids. And so midway through the 9 weeks, I asked them to rate themselves. And I said, if you're going to rate yourself, right after you rate yourself is you have to explain your rating. And if you are saying, I never have my cell phone out, and your cell phone's out all the time, and it's not supposed to be, then the 10 you put down is not going to be a 10. But I basically gave them the rating they gave themselves, and most of them were not all 10s. They were and the comments they made were very insightful of, okay, what are you going to do to change this? Because some kids were at the end of the night, are we going to do that again? Because I really think I've gotten better on these things. So can I rate myself again? Sure. That seems like a reasonable thing. So the attitude in class seems pretty great.
We are just on the cusp of learning how to use this program and do it well. And so it's a start. Thanks. Good. Hey, that's the interpretation.
Who says teachers don't know how to fill time? You've got
All
10
right, wasn't
minutes.
this a great day? All right, I want to thank Lenore for being a gracious guest for this school
We're the
and the
guests, she's the
location.
host.
She's the host. Board members for putting everything together. Our talk peoples, John Thomas,
Thank
Ted
you.
Clark. Man, how about that?
Now, talking people do want to talk to you, Ted, about giving a TED Ed talk. One of the official TED Ed sites.
I tell you, I always get, I saw a TED Talk, blah, blah, blah. But this Hungarian one, that was a TED Talk.
Yeah. Something different.
That's why I teach physics and stuff.
Some last items that we'd really like to see is if you can fill out the survey form.
That's
really
on the
help
website.
us.
That's not the
That link's on the website.
Really help us decide, what kind of things you'd like to see, things you'd like to do, people you'd like to hear from. We are also looking for help on the board. Always looking for volunteers that want to help set up these types of programs. One we always have here in the Cincinnati area. Another one will be up in Columbus. So it's not just for Cincinnati people. There's a lot of Columbus people.
A lot more
Someone maybe
Southern
from
Ohio than Cincinnati.
yeah. Some people maybe out, in Marietta, Southern Ohio.
Next the spring meeting in February. Because why else would you hold a spring meeting?
Yeah.
But it should have a lot of here's teaching and classroom kind of stuff. It's hooking up with the Model Palooza from last year. And how many people were there last year, Kathy?
125.
So there'll be 125 or so teachers.
So
Many different presentations going on a variety of different subjects than just physics. Although, let's be honest. Should be physics.
Everything else is stamp collecting.
yes.
We still have some books, pencils, chapstick.
Come on,
chapstick.
We have giveaways.
Giveaways.
More giveaways over there.
I'm writing
You
everybody's
have-
name down right
We
now.
have
so
we
you-
have a rare edition.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh.
No.
I haven't even said what it is. It's a signed
You were
copy.
cleaning the
There
trash
is
off of your desk.
there is one of them in the world, as far as I know. There's one copy of this book signed by one of the authors.
It's your thesis.
It is not mine. It is not mine. It is by an
Remind me.
actual physics
You still have,
PhD person.
and you still have T-shirts for sale, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, over. So
What's-
actually, we have a whole stack. The
what's the-
tiny stack next to the big box is all giveaway
Slash.
stuff.
Look at this, hand dyed by me, $30.
So I am writing. If somebody else would get that little stack of stuff next to the big box is giveaway items.
Even the white roundy
We
thing.
should put them out here. We're gonna put everybody's name in, pull it out, you take the thing.
Kathy, this thing.
No, not that thing. That's
No, next to the
So
big
I
box.
looked at this and said, "Oh, this looks like it."
Yeah.
Yes.
The time release? Yeah, but that was like.
Alright, so.
Better living in chemistry.
What is that? That will go well.
All right, so you can start telling people what's there.
Well, sure. There's a laser. I recognize that.
Laser pointer. It's green. There's no.
This looks like earbuds,
earbuds.
which is nice. This is a level with something else in it. Looks like a tape measure. Something is broken now, but it's okay.
Ooh, look at Kathy.
What is this? Oh, this is a pointer, isn't it?
That's a laser pointer.
It's a laser
Is
pointer.
that a new what?
Actually,
This
it's very
is-
nice.
A new TA's Guide to Teaching Introductory Physics, signed by Dr. Kathy Harper. I mean,
Bring it to the next meeting, and if Sandy's there, she'll sign it, I'm sure. What are the chop laces here?
Commonly used capacitor values, and actually, this is
That would go really well
It
with
works
the.
great if your monitor is just a little too low on your desk. Just put that hook right underneath it. Gives you that extra quarter inch you need to see it just right.
A slightly used Slinky. I'm assuming it's slightly used. Maybe it's not.
I did not think
so.
I know.
Tornado makers.
Actually, so yeah, there's some. All right, so
Yeah,
this
there's a
is.
lot of toys.
I still don't have everybody's name down, but this is actually like a multi-USB thingy. So you plug it in, And we have resistor color codes, set of 10. You do that with your students. And then I brought these. These are left over from a workshop. These are sliders to help you write question stems for Bloom's level questions. So, like, remember, understand, and apply on this side.
I feel like
Analyze, evaluate, create. He approved of me ordering them for a
Bundle,
while.
bundle that with the highlighters you're giving out.
Rainbow set of 12.
Yeah.
We have 2 posters and 2 different styles that have the NGSS standards on them in different ways. This one has prettier pictures. This one's from Vernier. You know, both good things.
Laser, battery not included.
And now this is when I was cleaning out my desk. So this is a course pack from Physics 131I a really long time ago at Ohio State when course numbers only had 3 numbers.
Yeah, because that's what I was there.
And there's a bookmark in it. But no, what this really is this is a rare item. This is an ALPS kit.
Ooh,
The Alan Van Huvelen ALPS kit that you can no longer find in print.
I have some.
With a bonus of about 150 context-rich problems that you can find on the University of Minnesota's website. But this was actually a course pack for a mechanics class that Alan Van Huvelen himself taught. It's awesome. So this is how you get an ALPS kit now without violating copyright. So there you go. Oh, and a spherical cow sticker.
That is the best thing. No offense.
Yeah, I
It
took
is
one
amazing.
for mine.
I love
All right.
it.
So if I don't know you, I need to know how to spell your name. You're Mary, right? And then I'm so happy to see people here that I don't know because it's like sad when you go to a professional meeting and you know everybody. So I'm forgetting your name, Matt. And you there in between Doug and Darwin. I don't know your name either. Kimball.
Thank you for coming to the meeting.
Thank you all for coming. Okay, so we're gonna put these in a box.
Bring a friend next time. Or
There
5.
are many, many, many more free toys. It's true that our director of undergraduate labs will take them.